It's a great privilege to introduce Dr. Roger Cole. He's basically an Australian. He's a medical doctor. He's an oncologist and palliative care physician. He has cared for the terminally ill for 20 years now. He is in Gyan for 14 years, and is also an author. I'm sure many of you must have read Mission of Love and Healing the Heart and Soul. And he will now share his experiences and also the relationship with Baba's Gyan. So let's welcome Dr. Cole. Thank you.
Om Shanti. You know the daddies do it. Everyone else who comes on stage does it. So we say, Om Shanti. Is love, where is love found? It's found in, when we go, Om Shanti, from the heart. Om Shanti. Isn't love found in relationships? It's something we seek a lot in our lives, in Brahmin life in particular. In fact, most of us are here because of some experience of love at some time. Maybe that's an assumption as well, because for some it's lots of other things that draw us into a spiritual life, that attract us to Gyan, to Raj Yoga. And for some, love is a seemingly difficult task to experience. I have this feeling like, I love Baba. You know, I have so much love in my heart for Baba. I want to love Baba. But this family? I'm not so sure, sometimes. Sometimes God's love fills my heart with happiness. Sometimes family gives me a headache. Just that sometimes happens. But love, if we hold love and withhold love in any relationship, then actually we can't experience it in any relationship. And this aspect and this is a very long habit of 63 births, is to withhold love. Because we talk a lot about giving love, but we determine who we give love to and where we withhold love from. And this is how ego gets in the way of love. In my working life, I was attracted to working in palliative care or hospice care. Is the translation okay for everybody? Everybody's receiving translation, it's good? Yeah. I was attracted to working in palliative care, hospice care, care of the dying, in the context of training as a specialist in oncology, so as a medical oncologist, which is a chemotherapy side of cancer treatment. And one of the things that attracted me to working in this field was a need to feel myself as an empathic and compassionate human being. And somehow I didn't have that in the medicine that I was working in at the time. Oh, by the way, I brought you all a flower. You know, this flower is for all of you. Actually, I forgot. I picked it in the garden. You know, I felt a bit guilty when I was picking it. I was thinking, we should leave flowers to be appreciated where they are. And I was thinking, no, this is a very, very godly task of bringing a flower to this group, because a flower is a symbol of love. And it's a symbol also of what we become when we become loving. We become the flowers of Baba's garden, of God's garden. So, and when we become loving isn't just an aspect of the heart. It's when the heart is informing the mind with loving feelings. This is when there are loving feelings in the mind constantly. This is when we have that true connection of the heart and the mind. Yet I have to actually surrender myself in lots of ways to experience this love and live in a state of non-resistance, of a state of complete acceptance. You know, love is not just a kind of incognito thing. I mean, when you think what is love, it's a bit hard to define it, isn't it? Because it's a feeling. I fell in love. I fall into it, you know. It's not something that I can sort of just manifest. I fall into it. I mean, we might meditate in the morning and try to experience love, and it can be very hard to experience love. It's quite easy to experience detachment and peace, even purity. It's quite easy to experience these feelings that come from there. But love can be a difficult and intangible thing to grasp. And one of the secrets I've mentioned already is that love is experienced in relationship. Maybe partly in relationship to myself, but it must be experienced in relationship to others and with others. And to experience in relationship to others and with others, there must be a huge amount of acceptance in my life. Otherwise, I'll be making it difficult to experience love for myself. If I don't have acceptance, then I will feel resistance in relationships to someone. And if I feel resistance in relationship to someone, I withhold love from myself, and therefore withhold love from everybody. This is how ego gets in the way of love. It actually, I remember I was giving a talk once, and this was in Australia, in this sort of town hall, I think it was, and I was talking about, you know, these things, unconditional love and conditional love. So my move into palliative care, for instance, was I started to wonder, what is this unconditional love? What is this unconditional love? What is this love that I see sometimes and experience sometimes? Sometimes when someone is going through a dying process, just like we are, of course, we're all going through the dying process. Do you ever feel like, I just want to let go? Does anyone ever feel like that? I just want to let go. Be free. Be simple. Be yogi. Be sweet. You just have this feeling. And when I have sometimes seen this in the context of where people are dying, actually, this is what I started to observe. I was observing that people were dying, yet, and they were struggling, okay? They were struggling, but somewhere along the line of that struggle, they suddenly could find peace in the midst of that. And suffering was holding on. Suffering was holding on to everything that I've defined myself by. So my mind has a lot of definition of who I am that's attached to all types of form. And as I take definition from form, it's like the intellect gets trapped in the form of all these things. And there's a lot of thoughts then. There were not many thoughts in the Golden Age, or in my Golden Age stage. But there's a lot of thoughts because there's a duality of right and wrong. Duality of love and dislike, like and dislike. And all this duality creates these thoughts and feelings and negativity in the self. But when someone is going through this dying process, they're getting weaker. And in that weakness, they're frustrated because they can't do the things that they did before. They can't do the things that gave definition and value to the self. So they become frustrated, and they might become depressed and upset and afraid. And they're holding on. The tension inside is coming because I'm so defined by my family, by my relationships, by my job, by being a provider in that family, by all the things that we teach in Raj Yoga. We define ourselves by all of these things, and they hang on to all this sense of self. Until they can't hang on anymore because the body's no use. It's too weak. The body can't do those things anymore. It's no use to me. And at this moment, there's a sudden yielding to the process. a sudden acceptance of the process. And in this moment of acceptance, something happens that I never expected. Something happened that was never could be believed. All the fear that I was hanging on to, that made me hold on, was released, and I let go. And there was nothing but peace. This is how ego gets destroyed in the dying process. It's not a state of wisdom, but it's a state of acceptance. And in that state of acceptance, everything is automatically let go. I had a patient once who I went to see in the ward who said, Dr. Cole, actually she called me Roger. I tell the patients, don't call me doctor. If you call me doctor, I'll call you Mrs. Smith. Yeah. They said, don't call me Mrs. Smith. And I said, well, don't call me doctor. Call me Roger. You see, relationship is so important. We need to keep thinking relationship. Even in service, we need to create relationship, because this is where love is to be found, to be experienced, and to be shared. And she said to me, listen, I've read all your books. I just want you to tell me. And this lady was very, very, very weak. She was probably within, I'd say, well, she was actually, because she was within about a few weeks of dying. So she was only a week or two away from the end of her life. And she was struggling. She was struggling mentally. Physically, she was comfortable. But she was struggling mentally and emotionally with the whole process. And she looked at me and she said, and she'd been a very high-achieving woman. She was a very powerful woman. She'd worked in local government and had run businesses of her own. Had been a very powerful, in control, very successful, high-achieving woman. And she looked at me and she said, "How do I let go? What do I do?" And I could see in her face all the struggle. And she asked me the question, and I felt inadequate, because she was looking at me like I was the guru of letting go. You know, I've read the section in your book, here's the guru of letting go, and I had no idea in my mind how to respond to her or what to say. But what I did was I just stood for a few moments, and as I looked at her, it's important sometimes when you're not sure what to say, not just to say something, but to allow some space. So as I looked at her, I suppose a little drishti, okay? I was allowing there was a little bit of space, and everything about her started to enter my mind. All the things I just told you about her started entering my mind. And then I realized that this lady was such an achiever. She was still trying to do letting go. She was trying to succeed at dying. I need to succeed at dying peacefully. So she was trying to do this letting go. And then I had this touching, in this space that was created. Maybe this is called feeling the pulse, isn't it? Or empathy. It's allowing it's finding the feeling of that human being at that moment. And in that space, that moment of empathy, the thought came to me what to do, what to say. So I said to her, "There's nothing to let go of. Nothing. There's nothing to let go of. Don't worry about anything." And she said, "Oh, thank God for that." And in that moment, she became peaceful. Her face changed in front of me. Everything became calm. I don't have to do anything. In her class the other day, a point I remember from Daddy Janki was, she said, "Don't try too hard. Just accept Baba's love. Let the soul accept Baba. Just accept accept. Let go of resistance. Even if there's things you don't quite believe or haven't quite accepted as moved along, and that would be true of, I'm sure, of some of us here, maybe even many of us here, if we're really, really deeply honest. Because if we'd believed everything and accepted everything, we'd already be karmatit. The game would be over. Because that moment of total acceptance is the end of the game. It's okay sometimes to just put something aside. I don't have to let it worry me. I'll just move along with what I really have. And and I'll just accept that, but I won't think about it. Because the mind is a useless instrument for understanding. It is, honestly. We're talking about love here. Love, the heart informing the mind. But where is love? Is love in the heart? Or what is it Baba says? That at the end, there is no love in the intellect of most human beings at the end. So where is love? Is it in the heart or is it in the intellect? Are the feelings, is it the feelings come into the mind from the heart, and where is the heart, the loving being? Who is the loving being? What is the loving being? And it's the pure acceptance of the intellect that draws the loving being into my experience and opens. It opens the channels of ego and resistance that separate the mind, that give non-loving feelings into the mind, stressful feelings into the mind. It opens the channel of the mind to Baba's vibration, Baba's ever-present company, God's love. And one other thing, which I'll tell you about in a minute. There was, I want to talk, I'll tell you about it in a minute because it's another aspect of what real love is or what true love is. And true love is unconditional love, but unconditional love is a quality of being, not a quality of giving or doing. It's not an action actually, it's a state of being, and again acceptance means to stay present now. If I have the power of acceptance, I can be present now, which means I become the loving being. And the feelings of the mind in the present when it's in acceptance are pure loving feelings, but pure loving feelings have many other qualities, and all the virtues actually have loving feelings in them. So the tolerance has loving feelings in it. Easiness has loving feelings. Sweetness has loving feelings. Stability has loving feelings. But there's another dimension to that loving feeling that actually secures that love, actually. And I'll give you I'll talk to you about another of my patients here to bring that to life a little bit. Actually, it was a volunteer who worked with the hospice, with the palliative care. And she became a volunteer because she observed her mother's death. And that inspired her to be a volunteer. So she was using a very, one of those moments of sorrow in her life. She was using this moment of sorrow now to become a form of service. So she was turning it into a form of service as a volunteer in hospice. And I was talking about state of acceptance. And what we went into in this state of acceptance was I described the peace and around the soul at the time of acceptance. And I asked if anyone had had that experience before. And this volunteer put her hand up. And so I asked her some questions about that acceptance. First of all, what was it like? She said it was so peaceful. It was so peaceful. Everything was peaceful. The room, everything. There was nothing but peace. And I said, well, I asked her to ask some questions about this. And I asked the questions that we all understand in Raj Yoga, okay? I asked her, was your mother worried about her disease or the appearance of her body. It was very wasted and thin at that time. And she said no, she had no concern anymore about this illness. She was totally free from this. She used to be very vain, actually. She was very particular about her hair and her makeup and her looks and appearance. But at this time, when she had totally let go of the physical appearances of things. I said, what about the world outside? What's going on? The news, the local community, because this lady had been very, very much into the local community. And again, of course, she let go of all of that. She wasn't interested. She developed disinterest. This happens when people are starting to lose the ability and the energy to put into relationships, is they develop disinterest in relationships, even food and things like that. So she developed disinterest in all of those things. What about her relationship with you and your sisters? What was it like? What was it like at that time? And she said, well, it was as if my mother really struggled with separating from us, and there was a lot of grief happening inside her during that separation. But at this time, she let go of all of that. And yet we were experiencing a love from her that we'd never experienced before. And she said at the end, there was no fear in my mother's eyes. It was just pure peace. And when I looked into my mother's eyes, it was as if I was looking into a mirror that was reflecting who I really am back to me. Because I just felt absolutely peaceful in her company. And there was nothing but love in that room. All around. Nothing but love. The soul had become a loving being, had become free from all the limitations of ego. You don't actually have to have a religion to find peace when you're dying. You just have to get rid of ego. When ego's gone, the soul becomes peaceful at that time. And the pure aspect of the nature of loving being is connected to that peace. The state of acceptance, fearlessness. And fearlessness isn't a quality actually, it's a space, isn't it? It's absence of fear. And this fearlessness creates a space in which love enters the room, not just the soul. It enters the room. So the loving being is revealed. And it's revealed when the only thing that dies is ego. When ego goes, this is what's left behind. But it's not a state of wisdom, it's a state of acceptance. And it's also a state of innocence. It's like in this acceptance, the innocence has risen and the ego has dissolved. And what's left behind is I've reclaimed my innocence in a state of acceptance and pure being. And I'm in the moment. This is being in the now. So it was like looking into a mirror where I experienced myself as I am. And this is the quality that gives love power. It's the quality of truth. I can remember I know I've been to a few of your countries over the years. I can remember one very special moment actually. It was at the Sierra Negra Retreat Center in Brazil. Is that right? Sierra Negra, like Black Mountains. I think that's where in morning class and having yoga at morning class, I had an experience of just this total bodiless feeling, a state of absolute pure being, complete silence. Not a feeling, not a thought, nothing in the mind, just pure silence, nothing. And that silence was there for an extended period of time, and I sat there observing it. and it was like that seed stage meditation. But the only thought that came into my mind at that moment was, this is better than love. This was the final thought. This is better than love. Actually, this is, what is the word? This is truth. This is the seed, it's the source, the essence, where the ocean expands from. Drawn right into the essence, from the seed from which the ocean expands. So I can be in the ocean, but to go to the seed, this is where the power comes into the love, is where it has that connection and infusion with truth. So not just love in all my virtues, but truth in my virtues. And this truth comes in yogi life from pure awareness, maintaining, Daddy Gulzar's class last night, awareness that is pure and clear and clean and honest. It holds this essenceful stage from which we can then, as Baba's children, not just as Baba's, not just in that way Karavan, Karan Karavanhar, that Karavanhar aspect of Shiv Baba, but also Karavanhar is that Baba recreates myself as the seed, the essence, the source, the truth from which the ocean emerges. So not just that Baba comes through me, but Baba works through me also by renewing my soul-conscious stage. So true love, unconditional love, is soul-conscious love. And Baba always has soul-conscious love. So whereas Baba is always loving, he's never attached to anything. So I was telling you about that talk I was giving in the that town hall, and I was talking about love. You may have forgotten already, but I started to tell you about that. Then I went off somewhere else. Well, I was talking in this town hall about love, funnily enough, believe it or not. And I was talking about, you see, even Baba will say to you, sometimes in the Murlis, Baba will say that when couples become lovers, the love is not a vice. I mean, Baba defines as a difference. And in some ways, perhaps it's true that all love is unconditional, but what conditions have we put on that unconditional love? That we have changed its qualities, or we're taking on the foundation of love. Not just giving and receiving, maybe that's the Rajo stage where we give and receive love, but the Tamo stage is where we're just taking through love. We're just using love to take. I mean, when I came into Gyan, I had 2 children. And they were aged 2 and 4 years at that time. I was also married at the time, actually. It's 14 years ago now, so everyone's been growing up and leaving me. First my wife grew up and left me. And my daughter grew up and left me. And my son grew up and left me. But one of the... I forgot what I was going to say now. But maybe I better pick up the flower again. But one of the... what was I saying? Sorry? Don't all talk at once? Sorry? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll go back to the... I'll go back to the town hall where I was giving this talk, and I was talking about unconditional love, and then I was saying how it is that even my love for my children, I can't honestly tell you that I loved my children unconditionally. I can't honestly tell you that. And I started to talk about this, how we condition love, because if I love my child unconditionally, but I'm withholding love from anywhere else, I don't like this person too much, then actually the condition of loving my child is that that's my child. So I am conditioning love by being the director of love. This is what ego does. Ego becomes the one that directs love or messes around with it. And it conditions love in different ways. So that conditioning is attachment in love there. Other conditioning might be conditioned with lust, certain desires that I have. In actual fact, any special relationship is a relationship of love that ego has created, because it's made it more special than the rest. And so it's limited the quality of love. It's not leaving love in the unlimited. It's not leaving relationship. It's not leaving compassion in the unlimited. Even compassion, I could be compassionate as a doctor because I need to be valued by others. So I might have found a very smart way of taking value for myself from others. So showing compassion and being a loving doctor might be a very good way of me meeting my own need to be needed, to be experienced as compassionate by others, as a loving being. And so even that compassion then, or the loving qualities that I'm showing, they can be a little bit of a smokescreen for how I'm serving myself inside. And so there's a motive underneath, which is placing conditions on the love that I'm giving, isn't it? So one is motives. This will condition love. The other is more gross. It's taking on the foundation of love. When my children, you can take with any virtue. This is this is how we moved down from the Copper Age. We started to use our virtues to take, and actually the one you've taken with most is your best and deepest speciality. Like my son, when he was born, was the most innocent child. He's the sweetest child. Had those little eyes. He used to sit there like this Buddha. He was very fat. He's not now, he's very thin now, but then he was very fat. He used to sit there like this Buddha, and he had so much innocence and sweetness inside him. But then he learnt how to use his innocence, didn't he? Who's got children? Quite a lot, everybody. So, Dad, can I? And he looks at you in these eyes, the eyes. And the eyes, the innocence has already melted your heart, and even before you thought about it, you're giving him. So we start to actually, it's not that we fall into the vices, it's that we start to condition the qualities and virtues with desires that we have. And the vices later on become much more gross and complex developments of that process. But there's a lot of conditioned virtue in every vice. This is why we can reclaim our virtues or transform those vices again. Back to where the qualities that we've utilized motives to take with. Rajo is giving and receiving. Tamo is just taking. Everything in this world is about taking. And in the Golden Age, it was just bestower. So now we're learning to bestow and to give, to become virtuous, and to purify our awareness of those virtues and qualities, to experience them with an open heart, with acceptance of others, and loving feelings, not just from the heart, but loving feelings where the heart's informing the mind. And understanding that true love is not something I give. It's something I become. It's a state of being. Sometimes when I talk sometimes to health professionals, I sometimes talk about compassion. If I become compassionate, I don't have to be compassionate with anybody, because I can then be natural. isn't it? If I become this, then I can be natural. I don't have to try to be it. I don't have to try. This is why people burn out, partly. They're trying so much, they're giving so much, but they're not understanding that they're taking at the same time. And so they're trying to be compassionate beings, but they're forgetting, if I can sit and become compassionate, if I can become tolerant, if I can become sweet, if I can become gentle, when I become generous-hearted, when I have easiness in my nature, then I don't have to think about anything except being that, except because I am that. So I can go around my work and family and I can, my Raj Yoga, all of these things I can do in a natural way because I'm becoming these things. I don't have the pressure of trying too hard. Easier said than done. I mean, I have to confess, that there are things there are things ultimately we do struggle with and have difficulty with. But when they've gone, when those struggles and difficulties have gone away, and you think back on them, you wonder, why was I so pressured by that? Even a conflict. Has anyone ever been in conflict? I mean, I'm only kind of young in Gyan. Maybe there's no conflict left in this room apart from me talking about my problems here. But it's nice to have you all listening to me. But if you have, like in a conflict, you can, the problems when you sort of get, I sort of forgot what I was going to say again now. What was I saying about a conflict? Help me here, help me. The problem is, fill this gap, fill this space. Yeah, has anyone been in conflict? But the thing about this quality, of love and peace and acceptance is that it will finish the conflict inside you. And again, let's say this again, let's reinforce this power of acceptance. This power of acceptance. It's actually knowledge. The seed is knowledge, and it's drama. But that doesn't always help us accept. And yet if I had total faith in drama, I could accept everything. And when I accept, I become the creator. It's this acceptance, because it takes out resistance. And when there's no resistance inside me, then my life becomes a creative force of positive energy. So we become creators. With Baba. Baba shows us how. So love, peace, happiness, 3 things we would all wish to have constantly in our lives. Loving feelings in the mind, no conflict, no pressure, no problems, no worries, not even worrying about my stage and why is it that by the end of every day I had to start again the next day. Does anyone have that feeling? You get to the end of the day and you have to start again the next day? Because you didn't quite, you were going well by mid-morning. By lunchtime things were going pretty well. By mid-afternoon you weren't going too badly, but 4 o'clock it all went wrong. Not 4 o'clock in the morning. And somehow old patterns and habits and things like that come in front, and we lose that power, perhaps the yoga power now. We lose the yoga power somewhere through the day, and then we have this disappointment, and we have to take care not to become disheartened then, because we start to then forget that we are the elevated beings who are recognizing Shiv Baba. at the only time that he comes in the cycle. We let go and forget the remembrance of the elevated vision that Baba has on us. And the elevated vision of Baba's is both the experience of this ocean and being drawn into the essence. The ocean of love and the essence of truth. The state of being. I'll share with you one little experience, and after 12 o'clock we can have a few questions and answers. But I'll share with you a little experience. This is where my spiritual life began. It was before Gyan, actually. About 8 years beforehand. I went to... I'll only tell you briefly some of the outline, because some of you will have already heard this story. But I went to a workshop with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1984. And she's a lady who did a lot of work on death and dying in the 70s and 80s. And she wrote a landmark book called On Death and Dying. She was a psychiatrist in the USA. And I went to a life-death transitional workshop with her in 1984. And it was at a time when I was seeking, really in medicine, some kind of empathy and compassion for others, to listen, to understand the feelings, and to respond to the needs that people have. So to listen, to understand is empathy, feeling the pulse. That's empathy. To understand, to listen. And to respond is actually, to respond to the needs is compassion. It has some sort of appropriate action to the needs of the individual in it. And I was exploring all of this, listening to my patients. And one of the patients gave me this information about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross coming to Australia. And I went on this workshop, a 5-day workshop with 90 other health professionals. And I thought it was like a seminar, on death and dying. She'd write up all the points about how to care for the dying, and I'd write them all down, then I'd go back to the hospital, and I'd know everything about caring for the dying, no problems. I got to this workshop, and what happened was quite unexpected. That there's 90 health professionals there, and they put a mattress in front of Elizabeth and some of these other and a couple of other facilitators. And what happened was people were then encouraged to come forwards and get in touch with their feelings from the past. So people started screaming and crying, shouting, being angry, and getting all this anger out. They had these telephone directories with a big stick on top of them, and what you did was you put a telephone directory down, and when you got angry, you hit it with a stick. Lots, and tore it to pieces, getting all this anger out of you. And then if you got into sorrow, they gave you this soft pillow that you could hold there, like maybe someone you lost in the past, where you just comforting and touching this sorrow and talking to this person, saying the things you hadn't said. And so there's all these people started to cry or shout and scream, one at a time, not all 90 together. And I was looking at this going, what am I doing here? These people are all crazy, they need help. But what happened was, I got in about as people came forwards, I was going backwards. But what happened was my heart got touched, and this is what she said: when someone pushes your buttons, that means if your heart gets touched, it's your turn. So my heart got touched, and what had happened was I was carrying with me from my childhood, when I was 10 years old. I had a sister who died a sudden death. They call them sudden infant death. So she died at the age of 10 months. And I always have this thought now that my sister never lost her innocence in life. So she carried this seed of innocence through her life, and she left it in my heart and left. And now 20 years later, when I was 30 years old, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was, she became the instrument, this seed of innocence became the instrument the key that unlocked my heart in this workshop, because I felt all the grief that I had inside me, all the sorrow. And the heart opened. And all the sorrow came out. Like I started to cry, like really cry and sob. And all this sorrow came out of my heart. And it was like anything that was trapped in my heart from the past, that was sorrow, could see the heart had suddenly opened, and everything took the opportunity to get out at once. So we call this it was a catharsis. And all this sorrow left me, and I was crying, and for about 10 minutes I just sobbed and cried. There was a space, and something really amazing started to happen, and that is that the heart started to fill with peace. I started to experience so much peace. It just flowed inside, and I started to look up, and then I started to feel more peace, like the whole body, the whole mind, everything became totally, deeply, deeply peaceful, until I couldn't believe you could experience more peace, and I experienced more peace. And I started to feel liberated, a sense of total, total liberation and freedom. And then so much bliss. It's like waves, like happiness and bliss came inside. And I was there, and I was looking up in this room, and the next thing I felt was being drawn into this just pure loving feeling. Everything dissolved. Mind dissolved, body dissolved. I became completely free and bodiless, and there's waves and waves of love. I felt at one with the universe, as if everything that existed was now a part of me, and that I was a part of everything that existed, just dissolved into space. I looked at the room, and 90 people had become like these, like it was like a moment in time where everything was frozen, and there was just light around everybody in that room. And when I walked, it felt like I was floating, like I was off the ground. I had to check my feet. Am I really on the ground here? And for 3 weeks I experienced this love. I floated around in love. I was just in love. There was no one there. I was in a state of love. I went back to the hospital. And I was just in love with all the nurses, in love with all the patients, in love with all the families, in love with all the doctors. I was in love with the flowers, the trees, the car park. There was no part of me I could define that was separate from love. But I was in a conflict at the time with the professor who was supervising my training. She's not good for the career of a young doctor. But when I saw him, I felt so much love. So I told him, I said, I love you. This was not a good career move either. He got the team psychiatrist to see me. And this psychiatrist, like sometimes you say, when the spiritual path is ready for you, it'll happen. And it's like everything is ready, just waiting for you, and then the path will open, and everyone you need will be waiting to show you the way, so that you can find your way to Baba. And this psychiatrist was a really deep Christian soul who had a childhood malignancy, and he recognized in me an opportunity that this experience was about. And so he took me aside and he offered me an hour of his time a week for 1 year, so I could sit and process this experience and start to learn about empathy and understanding and acceptance of others. And I started to realize that what had happened in this moment was, when my heart opened. I'm not suggesting this process to anybody here, by the way. I'm not suggesting this process. I'm just sharing what happened to me, and I'm not saying it would make a difference to anybody here. But when my heart opened, what happened was I experienced the original, eternal sanskars, the purity and innocence of the soul and the eternal nature of the soul, in total peace and liberation and freedom. And from within, looking, it was like a window opened, and from within, looking through that window, I was drawn into the ocean of unconditional love. I was drawn into the expansion, the ocean of love. I didn't know Baba at the time, but I'd found God. And I was an atheist before this happened. So I was drawn into this ocean of love. And so, and I started to realize this was God has touched me. This was God that I've experienced. And I began to know God and to meditate on that relationship from that point onwards in my life. And I started to realize then that when I came back from the workshop, I was like hanging from the rafters. I don't know if it's like, I'll say that again for translation. It's like hanging from the ceiling. It's like hanging from the ceiling, just love everywhere. You know, I was in a great place, but it made others a bit uncomfortable. Yeah. And then I started to recognize that the power of integrating and understanding this pure quality of soul-conscious love, and started to understand it in relationship with others. It was about lots of things, adjusting myself, tolerating, being easy-natured, being sweet, simple, having very pure feelings, understanding and accepting. This is what tolerance really is to understand and accept with love. Because you know where you've come from, so you understand where others are at the moment. So I'm not going to be influenced by that. This is loving detachment, going beyond influence. You have to find new language for detachment to understand what it means. You know, peaceful, purity, peaceful and loving. Pure and loving, sweet and loving. This is the language for detachment and loving. New language makes you understand what real detachment is, merciful and loving. It's a state of absolute awareness, understanding and acceptance of others. And here is the healing power of love. It changes the inner feelings of the self, and it reaches deeply into the sanskars. And then the sanskars will change. But I need to know how, I need to use these qualities, especially this one of acceptance. The more I accept and accept and accept and accept and accept, the more free I become, the more happy I become, the more peaceful I become. And so I become benevolent and giving in a natural way. This is the language of love. Take away the word love for a moment and realize how much is contained in that word. Then you start to understand, if I can just become loving, all of those things will start to be naturally part of me. I become natural. They call them natural yogi soul. Then I'm very honest. Because honesty, I mean, I think there's three aspects to honesty. I become very honest in that I become, one level is I stop telling lies. I think I've just about accomplished that now. I stop telling lies. The second level is that I become the same inside and out. What you see is what I am. This is transparency. So when there's acceptance and no resistance, I become transparent. And then I'm the same on the inside and out. And I'm not hiding anything inside anymore. And finally I become true to my higher self. This is another third level of honesty. I become true to my highest self, which is true to Baba's vision on the soul. I become true to Baba's vision on the soul. Then my life is an expression of truth. Whereas before my experience, my life had been a denial of truth. Because I didn't have any awareness of what truth was. I didn't have any awareness of the soul or a spiritual dimension or of God. I didn't have any knowledge of those things. I didn't even believe in them, to be honest with you. But now you walk the path, non-resistance, the path of acceptance, of purity in the awareness, the path of truth. And this truth leads home. It leads home to peace, it leads home to purity, it leads home to innocence. And if I can reawaken innocence and become very sweet and innocent, at the same time I become sensible. That is, I become wise. And this is what wisdom is for me. It's when I actually reclaim my innocence by acceptance and becoming free of the limitations of ego. This is wisdom, is reclaiming innocence. At the end of life, reclaiming innocence is a state of acceptance of the circumstances of death, where I find peace. So reclaimed innocence at the end of life is acceptance. At the beginning of the life, innocence is sweetness. In the middle of life, when I die alive, reclaimed innocence is wisdom. So I think there's time for some questions. Actually, we're going to have some questions. Probably need another mic. By the way, I don't speak Spanish or Portuguese or German or Russian, which makes it a little bit limited question-wise. If you ask a question, I'll repeat the question before answering it as well. Does anyone have a question? Does the question can be interpreted as well? Is that right? Anyway, we'll see.
Roger, without getting too bogged down in the definition thing, in terms of the heart, how do you see that in relation to, say, the intellect as well as the mind, in terms of its role and relationship, when do you separate them out?
What's the relationship between the heart, intellect, and the mind? It's quite an interesting topic. Sometimes I think the sisters should answer this one. But I actually have this thought. We spend the mind is a very poor instrument of understanding. If you try to understand any of this gyan through your mind, you'll be forever trying to understand this gyan through the mind. Because the mind has been under too many influences for 63 births, and it's got the influences of the world upon it, it's got the influences of body conscious attitudes on it, it's got the influence of ego, it's got the influence of desires, it's got the influence of attractions on it. So the mind is a useless instrument for understanding. And understanding doesn't come through the mind. But the mind can carry understanding in it. The mind can carry the feelings of understanding. When we go through transformation, we're actually transforming the feelings of the mind through understanding. And the understanding we get comes from experiences, doesn't it? Is that right? It's like, I can think about something for 300 years and never get there. And then one day I just go, aha, and we call it having a realization, isn't it? And then suddenly I have this understanding, and there's a new feeling in my mind that's carrying this understanding. And that carries different actions with it, that new feeling in my mind. So this is the thought I'm having, is that when we associate the heart with love, and we associate the mind with thinking. So we think about the head and the heart, don't we? We put our hand here from the heart. Are such beautiful feelings, and then we get a headache thinking about them. Or we remember them, and we just can't recreate them. I might be sitting here today wishing I could get yesterday's meditation experience. Where did that go, That moment when I was watching the balloons go off the other day at Shivratri. I had this magical moment. Sometimes you have these magical moments. This is a magical moment, watching these balloons carrying Shiv Baba's flag into the blue sky. And I looked at there, and I had this sort of feeling of absolute pure being, and the mind was so blissful and happy. And I couldn't get that feeling in Amrit Vela the next day, and do you know what I mean? You start, your mind is comparing constantly, but when the heart and the mind are connected, the feelings of the mind are loving, and the loving feelings actually are a quality that come from the intellect. The intellect has to be defined as not a thinking part of the soul. The mind is a thinking part, and it reflects, the feelings from the intellect are reflected from the mind, so the intellect is connected to awareness and consciousness. And what is my awareness or consciousness is connected to the feelings in the mind, and then the quality of thought and action. But when the feelings of the mind are very, very high and very, very pure, there's not much thought connected to action. I think in the golden age there'll be very little thought connected to an action. I think an angel has very little thought connected to an action, but has the feeling of pure connection with God and of revelation of that. The feeling of that. And this is where in a way the feelings of the mind is what we call the heart. The feelings of the mind, not the thinking of the mind. Isn't it? When you've got a lot of love happening and a lot of peace happening, a lot of clarity happening, the feeling in the mind is beautiful, isn't it? The feeling in the body is beautiful. Everything, the being is beautiful. So this being is where's this being coming from? It's the feelings of the mind. And when the intellect's becoming pure source of love, a loving intellect, then the sanskars that are pure come through the loving intellect, and that allows those feelings to come into the mind. So the intellect is discerning. It's not discerning like I'm trying to think what's right and wrong, what's true and false, what's illusion. That's when the mind's getting in the way, actually. The intellect discerns the original sanskars as it's becoming pure, and it brings a feeling of those sanskars into the mind. So the feeling of the eternal original sanskars comes into the mind. Forget about them being sanskars even now. I'm bringing the feelings of my original nature of being into the mind, and the other sanskars are now suppressed. Now, I'm not suppressing those sanskars. I'm not suppressing them. They're naturally becoming merged within, because the intellect's now allowing pure feelings to enter the mind, and the mind's becoming beautiful, quiet, silent. It's not working too hard, thinking too much. About 3 or 4 years ago, I came and sat on Baba's rock. I sat there trying to meditate. I've been meditating for 20 years. 3 or 4 years ago, I was 16 years on, and I was sitting there trying to meditate. And then I had one of these moments of realization. And the realization was like a silent feeling of awareness coming from within, that was a recognition that was deeply engaged within how much knowledge I've been taking over these years. It was a silent recognition, the realization came into the mind. I'm trying to meditate with my mind. My mind's trying to look for the sanskars of peace. This is what I'm trying to do with my yoga. This is what I realize on this mountain top. I'm struggling with my mind to find the sanskars of peace. We've already said what a useless instrument the mind is on its own. And then I recognized that I needed to actually just open myself completely to the opportunity that peace is what I am. And I started to realize this is yoga of the intellect, where the intellect becomes a pure instrument, a divine instrument, that naturally emerges, this is discerning power inwardly, that naturally emerges the sanskars of yoga for this time, for this age, into my being, into the present moment now. So, the feelings of the mind, that is the heart, call it the feelings of being if you like, because when the feelings are very positive and pure, there's not much thinking going on. It's like the head's disappeared, thank God. Yeah. And those sanskars just come, because they're wanting to come. Those sanskars want to come. I'm trying to understand too much knowledge through my mind. So I'm suppressing those sanskars, because I'm not letting the intellect, the feeling part of myself, intuition call it if you like, the intuitive part of myself. This intuition is the feeling of accuracy within the intellect that comes from understanding and acceptance. You know, when people say I had this intuition, I sometimes think, oh yeah, here we go. Because often, the trouble with intuition is it's confused by desires. So people have this intuition about what they want to do. You know, I've got this intuition about what I want to do. But intuition actually comes into the feelings of the mind when the intellect becomes very stable. And then everything you do is accurate. So you don't think it's intuition, it's just accuracy. It's not, you know, it works automatically. So I had the feeling to do something and it becomes totally accurate. Next question. Sorry, the answer was a bit long. So I went off a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, I've got a question. On school, I've learned from, I'm working in healthcare, that when people are coming close to death, they go through 5 steps of experience. And maybe it's also when we are coming to an old sanskar. A lot of people come first in resistance, sadness, anger, trying to compensate with other things. And then at last the step of acceptance comes. Is there a way to go right from the beginning to acceptance without going first to all these painful experiences?
So the question is, do we have to go through all these painful experiences when we're dying, or can we make one step to acceptance? It's a very good question, actually. Because it's an observed process. It's not that we can dictate that process or define it for someone else, but it's something that's been observed. That's what happens. Some people actually accept quite quickly, and they don't struggle as much as others. This definitely happens. So it must be possible for us to go into a state of acceptance in one moment. Maybe in a moment after a few questions, perhaps we'll have a little bit of meditation where I'll give perhaps some suggestions, a few words as we go into the meditation, and we'll look at one step healing. One step healing. This is the healing power of love. So we're talking about, this is talking about healing power of love, inner healing. We call it inner healing sometimes in the West. And what does that mean? It means the healing of my sanskars. So this Baba's love heals the sanskars. When I absorb and accept God's love, which is actually the same as which is soul conscious love, which is the same as the original love that I have seeded within my soul, which reawakens the unconditional love within myself, which is equal to Baba's love. This is something we forget, is we have love inside us that's equal to Baba's love. Baba's just giving us the vision to recognize this and the relationship to recognize this. Otherwise we can't have God's love in our life. And it's not just that Baba's love comes to me and I experience Baba's love. Actually, Baba gives me the awakening and realization of the love inside me that's equal to God's love, and I experience that, and then I'm in union with Baba. Oneness. In that moment, then, that is your state of acceptance. No suffering. Acceptance. Don't have to let go of anything. Suffering is trying to let go. Actually, suffering is holding on. When things are changing, it's holding on to the past. It's holding on to safety, security. Everything I've taken safety from the past, I'm holding on to that. Might even be the vices. But I can let go like this. Or I can let go like that. I'm afraid to let go because I'm afraid I'll lose something. But turn the hands upwards. Let go like that, and you have on the palm of your hand your whole life experience. Nothing lost. Nothing to fear. But you've become free of hanging on to these things. This is why you can keep your family and your relationships and wealth and all these things that might be part of your life. But instead of holding on to those things like this, so no one else can receive anything from what you have, you let them go like this. They're in the palm of your hand, but you don't use them for yourself anymore. You use them for everybody. So you can have one-step acceptance, but the process that's observed is the suffering process of going through the mental anguish, anger, denial, fear, depression. Does that sound familiar to any of the Brahmins in here? Listen, I think I've done a bit of this in my Brahmin life, to be honest with you. The first time I was thinking about becoming a Brahmin was when I came here on a retreat in '92. I was invited because I was a doctor, so they said, "Oh, here's a doctor. We'll kidnap him and take him to Mount Abu." So the Brahmins in Australia kidnapped me. They put me in this sack, tied me up, and brought me to Mount Abu. They didn't really kidnap. I might as well have been kidnapped. And they let me out of this sack on the mountaintop, and here I was, this innocent little thing, just in this place. It's so magical and so peaceful. And I found these yogis on this mountaintop, and they had these beautiful eyes. And I became addicted to yogis' eyes in this week. I was like this little doctor running around, There's a peace of mind sort of retreat. It wasn't one of those other retreats. And I was running around like addicted to yogis' eyes. I just wanted to, because they just sort of they were soft and gentle and sweet, and benevolent. They weren't taking anything. And I was melting. I turned into a little puddle. I just melted away. And afterwards I thought, later on now, in recent years, I thought, well, what is a yogi? Shall I tell you? Shall I tell you what I think? What is a yogi? And then I realized a yogi is a natural human being. And the contrast between a natural human being and an unnatural human being is so great in this day and age that we call them yogis. So forget about yogi. Okay, we're all becoming yogis. We're all yogis here, all of us. What are you becoming? You're becoming a natural human being with a natural mind. You're reclaiming your natural nature and you're bringing the feelings of that into the mind and serving the world with that. The contrast with the way the world's minds are today is such that they will experience your yoga power. Your yoga power is just the reclaimed natural condition of the mind, giving feelings and vibrations and energy to the world. Not just to people, but to nature. When I was doing a tour a few years ago, I got to Japan okay. When I got to Japan, I'd got there from Canada after being in Europe. And I don't know whether it was just jet lag, but like I had this disassociated sense of and total detachment, and I was wandering along like this, you know, like blissful, and I could feel the energy of everything. You know, I don't know if you've been to Japan, but these trains will arrive at the station, and the last person who got on that train just got their nose back in time before the carriage door shut. They're all jammed in. When the door opens, hundreds of souls pour out onto the platform. And I was on this station and really totally detached. And I just felt the soul energy moving. That's all I felt. And I'd just been in these lecture theatres all the time, and I hadn't seen nature for about 3 weeks. I went down to this river by nature, and I was taking this river, and I walked through these trees, and I was like this, totally detached, but I could feel the energy of everything. I could feel the union and connectedness with everything. I could feel the tree. I stood on this rock in the middle of this river, and I could feel the river flowing. Have you had this feeling? I could feel it. I actually felt I was the river flowing. You know? And then I recognized that when I become pure, that purity enters everything. I started to realize how the energy will change, how transformation will take place. You know, and it's only when you become really detached that you can feel the energy. You can go and look at a flower and say, what a beautiful flower. But when you become detached from that flower, you'll feel it. You'll feel it. Go and try it. Everyone can go and look at a flower. If after this I walk down, everyone will look at this flower. You become detached from the scene you're in, and you'll feel this. You'll feel the energy and vitality and vibration of everything, and it'll be like it's part of you. I realize it's, in a sense, it's not, because it's an energy relationship, and the soul is incorporeal and is beyond form and energy. But the relationship with energy becomes real, and that's how we become creators with Baba's company. Shall we have a little meditation to finish on? A little yoga. We have 5 minutes. So we just have 5 minutes of meditation. We can go and sustain the bodies. Sorry, you've been sitting for quite a long time. I hope you're not too uncomfortable. So I'll give a little reflection that contains some of the sentiments that we've shared today, just as an entry into this yoga. But first, just sit quietly. Become centered. And become centered in the feelings of the mind. And just observe the feelings of the mind for a few moments. And feel the mind becoming completely free of resistance and accepting everything in this moment now. feel the mind in the present. Not in the past and not in the future. And don't try to do anything with the mind. Just observe its feelings. A pure being. Natural and simple. Very beautiful and sweet. A natural mind. I surrender this mind to the ocean of love. And in the ocean of love, there is liberation and gentle, pure, cool, blissful feelings in the mind. Then I feel that Baba's mind is my mind. And Baba's presence is with me now. I feel this presence. Like an ocean. A loving ocean, but I'm drawn deeply into this ocean, as if I'm being pulled towards the source. The seed. The truth. I stayed with the seed and the ocean for a few moments now. And something inside me is healed. Something inside me is healed. Om Shanti.